The Resident Evil 3 2020 remake is indeed an interesting game to talk about. Is it better than the original? Is it worse? How does it compare to the Resident Evil 2 remake? Well, let's try to break it down. Firstly, I'm a big fan of the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis on the OG PlayStation. Back when I was in high school, I used to play the game on a near daily basis, clocking my time in under 90 minutes on the hardest difficulty setting. That's right, folks, you heard it here first. Halo was not my first love, but rather the third iteration of the Resident Evil saga. So as you can imagine, I had a lot of expectations going into this game. Did it live up to them? Well, yes and no. Let's talk about it. You play as Jill Valentine, a STARS elite super cop who was also in the original Resident Evil. It takes place both before and after the events of Resident Evil 2, during the heart of the zombie outbreak in Raccoon City. Your mission is simple. Make it out alive while also trying to avoid the terrifying new nemesis that is relentlessly trying to track you down. First off, let's discuss the things I really liked about this game. I won't say much about the graphics here since it uses the same engine as Resident Evil 2, and both look absolutely phenomenal. But one of the things that really does stand out here as opposed to Resident Evil 2 is the soundtrack. The Resident Evil 3 remake is definitely much truer to its predecessor than Resident Evil 2, which is a relief considering that unlike in Resident Evil 2, it doesn't come with an option of switching back to the original OST. The game also has a number of callbacks to the original. For one, it's a much more action-oriented, fast-paced game than Resident Evil 2. That means more zombies, more monsters, and more ammo to use in order to deal with them all. Also, like in the original, if you want to start out on easy mode, Jill gets an assault rifle, which definitely comes in handy considering the sheer number of beasts you'll be battling up against. Nemesis himself also makes a return and wastes absolutely no time at all as he's there right at the start of the game. Later, he'll be armed with weapons like his classic rocket launcher along with a new flamethrower that he'll use to heat things up for Jill. One thing I noticed about Nemesis though is that he's not in the game very often, but when he is, the encounters you have with him are far more scripted than those you had with Mr. X in Resident Evil 2. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the things I feel like could have been improved upon with this game. Well, the game definitely feels rather short when compared to Resident Evil 2. Now, some of this stands to reason. In Resident Evil 2, you had both Claire and Leon campaigns to play through, and you could even swap them for slightly different variants in the story. Sure, the maps and layouts were basically the same, but there was enough variation to make the campaigns both new and interesting. Resident Evil 3, on the other hand, only has one campaign, and it can be beaten in roughly the same amount of time it takes to play through as either Leon or Claire in the previous game. One thing that I mentioned before the release of Resident Evil 2 last year is that I was hoping that Resident Evil 3 would either be included with the game after you play as Leon and Claire, or it would be in future DLC since the same models, mechanics, and even some of the same scenery could be recycled. And as it turns out, that's pretty much the game we got. A lot of recycled assets from Resident Evil 2. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not necessarily a bad thing considering how well done they were in Resident Evil 2, but at the same time, it's hard to see this as being a standalone game when it could have been shipped with its predecessor. I also noticed that not all of the positive mechanics from Resident Evil 2 made it into this game either. For example, in the previous title, you could shoot off a zombie's limbs and they would drop off and fall to the floor. But in this game, they sort of just explode, and that's it. I don't know. It just seems like a bit lazy to me compared to all the love that went into the last game. There's even a hospital segment where you're playing as the other main character, Carlos, and you're fighting off an entire horde of zombies. But after you take one down, they just explode and disintegrate. Maybe this was done because leaving them behind would have been too taxing on the game's engine, but again, this feels a bit lazy. Additionally, there are entire segments missing in the remake that were in the original, most notably the clock tower and cemetery portions. These were some of the best parts of the original, and I was sad to see them left out of the remake. Now, I know it seems like I'm dogging on this game, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I really did have a lot of fun with it, but at the same time, it still doesn't feel like a full game when it compared to Resident Evil 2. RE2 brought new things to the table and was significantly longer than its RE3 counterpart. And while RE3 does bring a few new mechanics to the table like dodging and interactive environments, it still feels like this would have been better suited as RE2 DLC rather than a full-priced game. Is the game worth your time? Absolutely, no question there. If you're a huge Resident Evil fan like I am, this game will not disappoint, and you should definitely pick it up. But at the same time, I'd wait until the Resident Evil 3 Remake goes on sale. So, the Resident Evil 3 2020 Remake. What did you think about it? Did you enjoy it as much as I did while still feeling like there could have been more to it? Are you fine with it as is, or do you think Capcom missed the mark on this one? Are you also like me in that you're hoping that Code Veronica will also get the same type of makeover that RE2 and RE3 did, but maybe as future DLC for the current game rather than a standalone title? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below, and I'd like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and watch this video. I really do hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope you'll consider subscribing for more great content right here on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful week. I'll catch you all right back here next time, and as always, I'm the Tyrant, signing off.